joined us from our Washington studio. And on the line from San Francisco, I also spoke to Clara Jeffries, who's co-editor of Mother Jones, a left-leaning investigations magazine. Does she think that this is a turning point?
I think it could be. I think this has outraged the country, and it's one of many mass shootings this year. The numbers just keep getting worse and worse. We've had twice as many casualties as in any year past. And I think it's going to behoove ordinary people to organize and responsible gun owners to step forward and say that they, too, support reasonable restrictions. We need to put the wind behind the politicians to make the change.
And why this incident? Is it because it involved very young elementary school-age children?
Well, of course, that makes it even more horrific and something that every parent certainly can relate to. But it's, we've had so many this year, each one seemingly worse than the other. They're all horrible. And I think really the country is just waking up to the fact that this is a pattern, that there are not getting the mental health care that they need, and we just can't continue to live in a society where we put our children and our citizens at such great risk.
David Rivkin, do you see it that way? Do you see that this could be a turning point in the debate and real changes to the laws governing gun ownership could be in the pipeline?
I do not. It is a tragic event. It tugs at very powerfully at the emotional heartstrings of us all, but we need to understand several points. What happens here is that the proponents in this debate on both sides, run to their favorite talking points. I would say 3 reasons why it would not lead to a fundamental change. First of all, there are constitutional realities based upon the Second Amendment as reflected in a couple of fairly recent Supreme Court decisions. One is called Heller, and the other one is called McDonald, that put very, very strong limits on what can be done as far as curtailing firearm ownership. In addition to that, there are serious restrictions based upon our structural separation of powers as to what the federal government is distinct from states can do, because criminal law matters are very much reserved to the states. So the federal government can certainly ban certain types of guns from interstate and intrastate commercial traffic, but frankly, it would make absolutely no difference, because the reason we have these types of tragedies is not a reflection of some magic firearm in somebody's hands. Look, you can pull out automatic guns or semi-automatic guns. A person armed with a couple of regular hunting rifles and a couple of handguns would be able to inflict the same type of damage. And we remember what happened in Norway, that has a virtually absolute ban on gun ownership. I think he killed over 60 people. So all those notions that you just had some regulatory regime that you would put in place, it would be a silver bullet. Even half of a silver bullet is absurd. It's not going to make any difference.
I know this is. I just wonder at this point whether it's worth reminding people what the Second Amendment says. And I'm just going to read it out. A well-regulated militia, be necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Why is that such an absolute? I just wonder whether you can explain that to our listeners. Why, perhaps, could it not be changed or reinterpreted?
The reason it cannot be reinterpreted is because the Supreme Court in the last several terms has said very clearly that that language establishes a constitutionally protected right to own guns at the individual level, quite aside from militia. And if I had 40 minutes, I can describe those details.
Sure, no, I know it's very.
But let me say this: you can't really get there without a constitutional amendment. And constitutional amendment is unthinkable given how difficult it is to pass. And despite what my colleague says, a large majority of Americans, even after terrible tragedies like this, understand it's not about gun ownership. But look, it is about mental illness. The real way of solving those problems is, frankly, to go back on some of the excesses of the 60s and 70s, where a lot of people were deinstitutionalized, so it's virtually impossible to commit somebody. There's one unifying feature of all those tragedies. They're all committed by mentally unbalanced people who need to be confined both for their own protection and protection of those around us. This person could have had a homemade bomb and could have blown up the whole school. You can't possibly come up with sort of mechanical ways of keeping this from happening.
Clara Jeffries, would you agree with that it's not just about gun ownership?
It's not just about gun ownership. Certainly we need more mental health care, which has been slashed massively in the United States for the past few decades. But the fact remains that if you walk into a classroom with a semi-automatic assault rifle, you can inflict a lot more damage a lot more quickly. That was the gun he used to butcher these children. Those weapons, repeatedly, again and again, we see when we analyze 63 mass shootings in America over the last couple of decades, assault weapons are the weapon of choice because people who want to do this kind of thing want an arsenal that only a member of the military should have.
Can I pose a question to my colleague? Do you really think that if assault weapons were banned, you walk into a school where not a single teacher has any firearms? I know police officers, but if you had 2 regular hunting rifles, which even the biggest proponent of gun control is not thinking about banning, they could not have killed as many children as he did? They had just 2 regular hunting rifles and a couple of pistols. That would not suffice.
Well, I mean, the ability to fire off, just a barrage of bullets to not have to reload, yes, you can kill. I mean, it's simple math. You can kill more people quicker. But the assault weapons aside, what we also need to change in this country is the culture of gun ownership. I'm not saying that it's going to happen maybe ever, and certainly not overnight, that we'd have some kind of outright ban on guns. There is a Second Amendment provision. I mean, that the interpretation of the Second Amendment could change over time in the courts. We've interpreted other parts of the Constitution differently in different eras. But what could change is the way that the NRA and other gun ownership affiliates basically bully people into thinking that any discussion of how people should use, store guns is not up for discussion.
That was Clara Jeffries of the website Mother Jones. I was also talking to the constitutional lawyer David Rivkin in Washington. Well, you can find more about the debate on gun laws in America and some statistics on the number of firearms murders in the US if you go to our website, a special website that's been set up about this story. It's bbc.com/Newtown. We will be coming back to this story after the news at past. We're going to be hearing from the head teacher in Texas who says that giving teachers guns is the best way to keep children safe. You're listening to Newshour for the BBC World Service.